The adventures of Robin Hood aren't over. Prince John and the sheriff are still scheming, and now Friar Tuck is in danger. Thank you for joining us today at Tantrum House Studio D. I'm Melissa Delp.
And I'm Kevin Delp. Friar Tuck in Danger is an expansion to The Adventures of Robin Hood, a co-op campaign game for 2 to 4 players. It's designed and illustrated by Michael Menzel and published by KOSMOS. They sent us this copy to review.
Now, we've played the entire original campaign and the expansion campaign, so we're going to talk about things in general and our opinions, but we're going to try not to spoil any of the specifics. If you'd like to hear about the original game and more about how the system plays, you can click on the link above. And this video instead will focus on the expansion, which does require the base game to play. Oh,
it's right here.
There it is.
The expansion comes with a board extension that fits next to the original board. It also has a lot of tiles that replace the original ones. This bag actually has the original tiles we removed. We didn't want to spoil any of the new ones. The starter sheet shows you which to replace.
There are also some new figures, one for Friar Tuck, and standing and moving figures for the Sheriff of Nottingham. And of course, there's a new storybook. This one is paperback, though, instead of hardback.
I did personally like that hardback version better.
Yeah, it's probably a little more expensive, too. So, like in the base game, each player plays as one of the characters from the Robin Hood stories. Little John, Will Scarlet, Maid Marian, and of course, Robin Hood. Now, the expansion comes with 4 scenarios that each take about 45 to 60 minutes to play.
The base game has 7 scenarios and a branching storyline.
This story is more linear. You're not choosing separate paths, but some scenarios have layered objectives. You have to complete goal A in a certain amount of rounds, and once you do, you're given goal B. And maybe more hourglasses to increase your time limit.
The first scenario, which is titled Chapter 8,
Ooh.
The Departure, is sort of like that. It eases you into the game, but it's not as simple as tutorial in the base game.
It's been a while since we've played the original campaign, so I did have to refresh my memory of the rules by reading the original rule booklet. They don't actually provide a lot of those rules in the expansion.
The main mechanics are the same, drawing discs out of the bag to see whose turn it is, and then using the walking and running figures to move around the board. You still draw cubes out of the bag to resolve attacks and encounters. One of the new elements is the Sheriff of Nottingham. He chases after Friar Tuck when a red cube is drawn out of the bag. Friar Tuck isn't a playable character, but players can meet up with him and move his figure along with their character. You get some benefits for having Friar Tuck tagging along with you. I like that all the characters have access to the special abilities from the beginning of the campaign. And we were also usually given more starting items and weapons, which was good since there are more enemies in this campaign and they're pretty strong. Some of the scenarios have multiple objectives you need to complete. Usually the order doesn't really matter. Because of that, there seemed like there was more to do. We played the campaign with my brother Charlie and sister-in-law Hannah, so it was the full player count with all of the playable characters. We'd often split up, 2 here and 2 there, or occasionally Charlie would abandon me to run off and do his own thing. But you know what? That's okay, because Maid Marian is tough and she can handle things herself. She did a lot. I really did like completing the multiple objectives in one scenario. When you interact with people on the board, you can usually ask them about the objectives, but you have to think about what they might know. Ask them about the wrong objective and you're not going to get anything really useful. Yes, we found that the hard way. But deduce correctly, and the answer could be just what you needed to progress in the story. In one of the scenarios, there were several ways to complete a task, and I knew 1 or 2 options, but I didn't talk to the right person to figure out the most efficient way. But we still won, which is important. We did. I just didn't get to do the cool thing. So let's talk a little bit about the critiques we have for the game. I'm going to start with the scenarios. Sure. I thought one of the objectives seemed a bit monotonous. It relied on certain discs being drawn from the bag.
Now, there was a way to speed things up if you got certain items, but to me, the procedure of the objective wasn't very interesting.
I agree with you there. Yeah, in that scenario, it felt like two players were kind of in waiting or like a holding pattern, and the other players could sort of really do stuff, but it was more like side stuff, keeping enemies at bay or trying to get the necessary item to make it go quicker. So that means some players might not be able to do as much that really progressed the story.
Yeah, I thought that there were some good, interesting storylines, but some kind of obvious stuff too. We kind of knew really early on what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't classify the expansion scenarios as amazing, but they weren't bad. I think personally I prefer the base game scenarios.
I actually really like the overall story. I personally wish that the new pieces could be playable characters in the game. It could have been like one versus many game, or like Sheriff of Nottingham being controlled by someone, or someone being Friar Tuck. He sort of felt like a side character that just sort of like, I'm here to help you out.
Concerning the storybook, the English translation wasn't terrible, but there were a few typos and places with awkward phrasing. Now, I have heard that some players have gotten tripped up regarding some rules and instructions, not necessarily game-breaking things, but things that made them a little uncertain.
The book's formatting can make it a little difficult to know what to read. Sometimes an entry is broken up with different boxes of info for your first playthrough and later playthroughs. If you're not paying attention, you might miss additional text that should be read after those boxes.
That did happen to us once. I didn't even realize we had missed some information until I read through the book afterward. And I did that because I wanted, the full context of the storyline for this review. So another thing with the book that I didn't like is the cardboard bookmarks. They were too thick to stay in place.
I agree.
So I'd recommend getting some yellow and red string or ribbon, or even thin strips of paper would work.
There is one mistake we know of on the board. One of the new tiles is missing a question mark. At some point, you'll probably be told to flip tile 62. The side with the image should have a question mark so you can interact with it. I'm not going to say what the image is because, spoilers.
That probably sounded like a lot of negative things. But some of them are fairly minor. Like we said in our previous video, we enjoy this game more for the adventure, the story, the deduction, than for the mechanisms.
Sure.
So some of the objectives focused on battling, and that wasn't exactly what we were looking for.
I totally fudge on the movement if my finger is close enough to what I'm supposed to do.
He does. We both really enjoyed the original game, and even with my critiques, I'm glad I played the Friar Tuck expansion. If you like the original, I think you will like this one too.
I actually put the expansion in my most favorite game I played in March 2023. I love the theme, the story, the advent calendar mechanic of uncovering what's behind the different tiles during the game. I just really like all that's involved in the game.
So we'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments whether or not you've played the original Adventures in Robin Hood. We'd love to know if you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Please like and subscribe.
Scenarios do have layered objections. Objection!
Object!
Sorry.
Still laughing at that.